Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this questions and answers session with Frank Piller, known around the world as the leading expert on open innovation and mass customization, and the leader of one of the best-selling masterclasses, Leading the Factory of the Future. For the next 45 minutes, Frank will be taking your questions on how to lead and innovate in Industry 4.0. Just type your question in the box on the right-hand side. You also have the option to raise your hand, which means you'd like to speak to Frank directly, and then I'll be able to get you the microphone. So I hope all of that is clear. Frank, unless you'd like to add anything, I guess everyone can just feel free to start sending your questions.
Yeah, welcome also from my side. I hope the connection is good and you also are able to see me here, at least in this direction. Very happy and curious to see what's coming from your direction. I think, Carolina, you got some questions already by email before. So we may start with those, but otherwise either share them or just give them to us via the chat function.
Great. There's the first question that we received is, how far should we go in connecting processes and smart technology and what will the return be?
So the sorry, can you repeat it? I was distracted with the system. Sorry about this.
No problem. How far should we go in connecting processes and smart technology? What will the return be?
Yeah, okay, so it's somehow the underlying question I think you picked as the first one is, for me, the promise really of Industry 4.0 and the smart factory of the future is that we connect previously unconnected silos of data, and that we somehow really get better visibility and connectivity of data. And so my intuitive answer would be, as far as possible, we should really do this connectivity. And what I also learned is very, very often, if you apply more advanced machine learning algorithms to really analyze data, often the surprising effects really come from the fact that you find connections between data that were not connected before, and where the algorithm finds patterns that were not visible to the human expert. However, we probably also can do it too far. There probably can be connectivity just for the sake of connectivity. And it's a little bit a chicken-egg problem here. So that, of course, as we don't know some of the surprising patterns we will find, and this all will come as a result of connecting data, we really don't know what we need to do. So the mode probably is more one of experimentation, where we start by connecting some data, really looking on the results in these use cases, and then adding more and more.
Amazing, thank you very much for that. A follow-on question from that was, how can we deal with more product and process complexity? How can we enhance flexibility?
So it's another good question, as very often so now the question is, how can we really use these connectivity, the insights that have been generated, how can we use it to achieve what kind of business objectives? And very often when I talk to practitioners, when we discuss in our master classes with the leadership network, the initial intuition of managers is, I do this for operational efficiency with regard to reducing cost, having predictive maintenance to lower unplanned downtime and so on. However, I always encourage people really to think not beyond operational efficiency, but really address strategic questions like flexibility. And perhaps an interesting story to share here at this point, we were with the Factory of the Future master classes last week, guests of BMW, the most advanced BMW plant in Leipzig. And with the Factory of the Future class, we visit this plant now for, I would say, roughly 3.5 years. And it's always really interesting to see how they develop. And for them, one of the really key topics are they shared the 5 core objectives why they do Industry 4.0 in this plant. And one was cost reduction, and they were achieving like a 5% cost reduction. But the majority of the thinking was to enhance the resilience of the plants, to have flexibility with regard to volume and the product mix. As in the past for BMW, the strategy was that you have a global network of plants and you share the series, between the plants. So you have one plant dedicated for the X series, a couple of them for the SUVs, another for the 2, the 3, the 5 series. And that was an easy world, and then we were optimizing on that plant level. However, given the current political situations, where you have a Brexit coming, but no one really knows when and how. You have an American president with new kind of tariffs and trade barriers. So they said our main objective is now to have a much higher volume mix ability. And also then with regard to electrification of the cars, everyone is sure in the industry that electrification will come, but no one really knows at what point there is a tipping point when consumers will really adopt these cars to much larger numbers. So also with regard to volume flexibility, which is a quite challenging task, is they have large challenges. And so I think in an ambitious Industry 4.0 strategy, you really should strive to look also for flexibility. And this was now a very long and complex answer, but on a short and easy question. But I hope I could bring over the point that for me, really, looking for flexibility is one of the big opportunities of Industry 4.0.
Thank you, very insightful. What about the manager role? So how will the Industry 4.0 really change the job of a manager in operations?
That's a broad question, the role of the manager in operations. So how should I address this? Well, let's say managers, what's the job of a manager? Well, to lead, to make decisions. And here we also have often in our classes an interesting discussion. Obviously, most of the existing plant managers, of the existing leaders of a global operations organization will say an algorithm, an Industry 4.0 system never can replace my job, as it really requires my domain expertise to really lead a factory and make critical decisions. There's another camp, more in academia, in advanced, in people thinking advanced about artificial intelligence and machine learning in the factory of the future. And they say, well, we're not so sure about it, as it may be there actually may be algorithms that do a better job as a manager in making operative decisions, as the algorithm is not biased by perceptions of the world, has no past dependencies, has no Monday mornings or Friday afternoon feelings. And so in what I believe is, and we are working hard on that vision in lots of research projects here in Aachen. So my vision here is that we will have a mix that will probably use advanced machine learning in the digital twin, as explained earlier, to really come to a situation where we provide the manager a clue, a hint, let's say, an indication that there is an interesting pattern, and that we then enable a manager to do an experimental learning on a digital twin in a kind of very advanced simulation model. So we would use then at this point, we would use artificial intelligence to find interesting indications, interesting clues, and then use human intelligence to come up with a solution proposal or some ideas how to implement it. And then again, we would use a simulation system and AI to really simulate these ideas of the human manager and find out about the consequences and do iterations, which we normally do in Six Sigma cycles over weeks or months, very, very quickly, perhaps overnight in an automated system. So I would say the role of the manager in the end is exactly the same. However, you would start probably on a higher level and somehow co-create your decisions with in a team, so to say, with an algorithm. And that's a little bit futuristic, but exactly the work to do. In the meantime, until we are at this ideal stage, I would say the main job of the manager today for Industry 4.0 is to really initiate and lead the change process, to really inspire people to create the vision with the team. And so, but this is more on the transformation process. Perhaps there are questions about this later on.
Thank you. What about the actual solutions being talked about? A lot of people, want to actually know whether there are solutions in the field of digitalization not worth trying. And an example given was that of augmented reality in commissioning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of hyped technologies, and some of them also like augmented reality in commissioning. Yeah, it's very advanced, and it comes with the glasses, Google glasses and others. They are smart gloves and so on. And I would say I see both. I know companies that are very happy about their augmented reality situation and applications, and many others say we tried it, it's still very complicated, it's very error prone, and actually is distracting the operator more than helping her or him. So I would say I couldn't name any technologies that are not worthwhile trying. I think the important thing is that you come up with your use case. And my recommendation here is that your use case never should start with a technology. It should really start with an open problem. It should really start with a problem either of the operator, of the worker, of an engineer. And then we should think, well, why can't we address this problem with current technologies, with the way how we use today? And then we may look into the huge assortment of novel digital tools for user interaction, for decision support, for handling, for automation. And then perhaps explore some of the new tools. And I think the mistake that many companies have made, they were fascinated by just a technology, like augmented reality was very hip, or virtual reality. Then I just invest in glasses and the technology and use a not so good use case. And then we say the technology is not good, while actually it was our question that was not the right one. So my advice here, always really start with the question, the problem, then have, and then see in an experimental way how technology can help.
Thank you. Just to remind everyone, you can type your questions on the right-hand side in the questions panel. On to the next questions. How can you drive mindset change in brownfield sites which are performing well?
Yeah, this now we come back to this transformation I mentioned earlier. As this is also one question we discuss often in our master classes on the factory of the future. And actually, this is one of the questions that is a motivator of some of our participants to join the master class and invest their time in the discussions with us. As the idea is that we all know somehow we perhaps have to change. We know about all the new opportunities. We read from consultant reports we should do something, but actually we are working with full capacity. We are making good money. We still have a long list of conventional established projects ahead of us for continuous improvement. We have a stable state, and why should we really disturb all that and look into the future? And so how can we motivate ourselves to really look into this? And that's a challenging question, and not so much for top leadership that often has a more long-term vision, but really more for middle managers or the people that are then really in charge of the implementation. So there are different ways to address it. I think first of all, we have to really see that it's the best situation if you have a well-working brownfield, as it's always much better to manage and act and pilot something and explore something new out of a situation of strength and not out of a situation of a crisis. even if somehow as mankind we always need this crisis to really, get really working on, which I think should be, perhaps you can have a little bit more proactive and not just this reactive behavior. And then normally if I have as you stated it, a good operating brownfield, I may have a strong lean practice. And actually a strong lean practice is very supportive for digitalization, as it makes no sense at all to digitalize a bad process. So actually, if I have a brownfield that has been optimized, that really has good practices here, then it's a perfect situation to now think about how can we reach the next level by digitalizing it, by really looking into better process visibility, by really looking beyond single workstations, but by looking on the gains of connecting the data of different applications and so on. And then there are different ways how to do it. Normally, I don't really want to interfere with entire, well-optimized process line. But I often, in an organization, have something like kind of pilot factory, meaning this could be a special line we use for special orders, either for rush orders, for special customers, for a higher degree of customization is useful, as usual. We have perhaps a center where we explore one or two new technologies. Perhaps we just made an investment into a new piece of machinery which has better sensor capabilities, connectivity capabilities. So often it makes sense to really pick these pockets which are a little bit different to the rest of the organization and start your operations there. Perhaps another concrete example on that, again from the BMW plant we visited with the leadership network last week. So they started to explore cobots. And they have, and if you know automotive manufacturing, it's a very well optimized chain, and it was an assembly with a clear tact structure, and really where you don't want to interfere with the assembly line and a transact. But they had the idea we really should apply also cobots there, and they don't have any robots in assembly, a lot of robots in the body shop. So they started with a cobot at an extra like at a parallel station where you do repairs. As sometimes something gets wrong in the normal process, you take out the car, the semi-finished car, and put it in a special workstation where you then manually do some rework and then give this order back into the line. So there is where they really started to work the cobot in a kind of emergency situation. As I said, well, this is not in the standard text. This is a workshop environment anyway. We have very well qualified personnel here, and the cobot really can help us in this specific case to apply an adhesive, which is this has to be very precise, and human people can do it, but it's actually also not a fun job to do. So working with a cobot, it worked. And then a year later, the cobot was in the line doing the standard procedure. So, and I think these are ways how you also in an optimized brownfield process can really start to explore new digital technologies.
Thank you. We have a question here from Volker. He said, we started to use an experiment with RPA. Any recommendation when to use it via solving the problem versus a standard IT project?
So can you tell me the acronym RPI?
RPA.
Okay, and RPA is then the synonym for, I have to acknowledge, robotic process automation, probably, or?
Yes.
This is RPA's robotic process organization. Yeah, that's exactly so. And this is a broader term of different technologies which that's behind these acronym robotic process automation. And this is, for example, like the cobot example I just shared from BMW. Of course, and I think the shift what we have here is that I think in most industries we have a very established practice somehow to really utilize robots in a strict robotic environment where I have in a strict connected automation with rather less flexibility and so on. What's now coming up is a new class of robots where I don't need a university trained robotic engineer to program it over a course of months, but where I have more intuitive way in robotic programming, where also this new class of robots called cooperative robots or cobots, which I can place next to a human as they don't have to live in the factory in a fence. And so from all the projects I have in my mind, what I saw in industry, they often started really in this experimental setting. But another very nice story I like to share is of Siemens. And I was in a Siemens factory where also a plant leader had the idea is, well, we don't have these corporates and they do more complex assembly of more complex electric motors there. And they said, well, we don't have a cobot yet, but we are interested in this technology. So this leader gave really a cobot as a Christmas present to his team and to the workers and said, here, you have it. We put it here in the corner and you can play around. And no formal projects, nothing. But the device is now here, and here are actually some iPads, and actually you can program it with an iPad very intuitively. 1.5 years later, this cobot is in the line. And this was really giving it to the teams to first explore the technology a little bit. And then it came into a Six Sigma cycle where someone said, okay, that's a problem. And then some guy said, well, but you see, we have this cobot here. I think we could try it out. So this was a very bottom-up experimental way. And I liked it also as it really prevented fears of employees. As a thing with regard to traditional robotic automation, well, people are used to this somehow. There's a high degree of automation. But with these cooperative robots, they are implemented in situations where we still have a lot of human labor, where workers both are sometimes afraid of their job, but also of really the perception of robots are dangerous, they can hurt me, and so on. So I think this was, for me, a very good practice in really developing the organization, accepting this technology, and also like making sense of it, where to put it in these operations.
Thank you. Another question we had is how much organizational change is actually needed when it comes to digitalization? Of course, that's a really broad question, but if you could just maybe give some insight on that.
Yeah, how much change? As I discussed this a little bit earlier with the question you shared on the brownfield. So probably it depends very much on your status quo, and the starting point of your digital journey, how much change you need. It depends on the context, on the culture you have here. But well, from my experience, in the end, you always need more change than you think. However, you should not be afraid of the change. And it should be not the hurdle that in the end you say, I do nothing. It's so big, this hurdle to go into it. What I see very often, the change on the technological side, change with regard to skills and competences is very manageable. And I saw very few companies really failing in at least their pilots, digital pilots, in the end because of skills and competences. I think we still have a lot of more these informal cultural hurdles, which are more with regard to resistance to some of these technologies. But very often, it's actually not the people, it's just the room we give them, the space we give them, the organizational slack, so to say, to experiment. So in another class here in the university in Aachen with some universities, we actually discussed this yesterday. And very often we really complain about the middle management. as we say, well, the top management, they really have the digital vision, they are supportive. Well, on the shop floor level, these people, we give them freedom of honor, they also like it. But it's are those middle managers that are really afraid for it and are really the resistance to change. But then in this discussion, we said, well, very often these are also the people that have the most responsibility for the current objectives. They are the ones that are the troubleshooters. They have the short-term objectives. They have the protection schedule to fulfill. So very often we just have to give them a little bit more room, freedom to experiment and really have time to think about the change, and the new measures as one thing. So it's also more formal response to your question or whoever asked it with regard to maturity audits. So actually there are by several consulting companies and universities either very quick or very, very sophisticated audit tools available that really help you to answer that question, how much change and where especially the change is needed. So to answer this question in a very systematic way. Here in Aachen, for example, at the university, we host the German Industry 4.0 Maturity Index. It's a very complex audit. It normally takes like a 1-week assessment in a company to answer. It's the official standard by the German government for Industry 4.0. And if you go through this kind of assessment, you get a very clear indicator where you need change and how much change is required in which directions and so on. So to summarize my probably again too long answer is, on the one hand side, there are tools and audits, but on the others, I think some of the change could be really happen very easily if we just provide a little bit space and slack to people to experiment.
Thank you. And is there any follow-on question from that? Is there any strategies that you've seen on experimenting or allowing people room for experimentation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perhaps I refer back to BMW, as I was really impressed this time with the visit and really how they went into their digital journey. As of course, if you're a big organization like BMW, you have a huge top-down strategy, and somewhere in the headquarters in Munich, people really think thoroughly about the factory of the future and the digital factory. And out of this exercise, BMW as a group identified 8 different technology fields like data and analytics, smart maintenance, the next generation of quality standards, and so on. And then within the network of plants, they have a way to really distribute this work, that you have lead plants, like one plant, like the one we visit in Leipzig, which has a global responsibility for advanced robotics, cooperative robotics. And they do experiment there and share that with the other. However, on the other way, and this is like a top-down strategy, on the other side, they also really realize that they need much more bottom-up experimentation, even after 4 or 5 years in the journey, but that they really need to have a strategy to share the knowledge coming out of this. So what they did on that side, really implemented, was on the first side, merge the lean team with the digital team. As I said, lean, which is more continuous improvement in the existing brownfield, and digital, creating the structure for the future. We shouldn't separate it, but we have to align it with the same team. And then this team went ahead and created now on the plant level different structures like tech days, where really people from different stations, from different areas of this huge plant with thousands of people working there can share practices. They created a tech exhibition for the workers, where really all the work associates can go like on the balcony and one of the factory halls to really see, touch some of the upcoming digital technologies like cobots, like smart devices to support workers, but also some data analytical tools. They created the BMW Innovation Garage, maker space for the workers really on the shop floor level to really tinker around in projects. They implemented creativity spaces, really nice innovation labs, which you normally only have at headquarters, again on the plant, directly for the people working in the plant, to really have a space with specific methodology to also do creative thinking about how to utilize digitalization. So they really were fostering these bottom-up experiments, but then created a nice way to really share the knowledge of what has been achieved there with other plants in a kind of community of practice, which now was formalized. So it was not just self-appointed people, but really people with a strong mandate to be in these environments. So perhaps this example could give you all a little bit an indication of what you can do even as a big global organization with regard to connecting a top-down strategy with really bottom-up experimentation.
Thank you. And you touched upon the subject of the job of the manager really being to lead that transformation. So someone wanted to know, what are the skills that one actually needs to successfully implement that strategy?
Yeah, it's a very broad question, and actually one where we have a nice exercise in our masterclass, and where I normally try to facilitate really the experiences of our participants. I would say very often these skills to lead really the strategizing and the change are not really digital change. Of course, but they are really good people management and change management skills. And with regard to really sensitizing, or really setting up a sense that we have to do something, coming up with a strategy, transforming the industry, and really then scaling it up and implementing. So I think these are traditional skills. However, there's a big however, which we shouldn't underestimate. We also found in our research, I do it with my PhD students here, we do with companies, you also need really some more than basic knowledge of the technologies as a leader. So to really make sense of what is coming there, to really know where to direct the change in, we really thought that also as a top leader, you should get to have at least a basic understanding of the technologies to come. And traditionally, if you are a manufacturing executive, you studied mechanical engineering, process engineering, and so on. So you normally have some good, profound knowledge of the traditional manufacturing technologies. And I think you also need to somehow acquire some more than basic skills, like, for example, nowadays on AI and machine learning. Is of course, you will never program the algorithm. You will never be the one, perhaps even make not the decisions in the end about an algorithmic toolkit. This is where you have the specialists for. But you should be able to have an informed decision, which also starts with a little bit better understanding of the technology. So I think we need somehow this magic person who on the one hand side has skills about the technologies, very good people management skills, then process management skills on the change management. It's maybe me an ideal manager, so perhaps you need a good team to really meet this and acquire this set of skills in the end.
Thank you. One question from Mr. Butt here is, one of the challenges to Industry 4.0 transformation is lack of business cases in aerospace industry. Kindly share your thoughts on this.
So in aerospace industry?
Yes.
Well, yes, I think aerospace, and I'm not really a core expert here, but it's a very interesting case, as on the one hand side, on the product situation, aerospace is one of the most famous Industry 4.0 cases with regard to operating the turbines of aerospaces, like what Rolls-Royce and others are doing with a value-based pricing models, with strong predictive maintenance, and really instead of selling you a turbine, selling you, power to the value of powering an airplane for the next mile. And so with strong sensoring IoT setups up to very new digital business models. Probably also with regard to all the sales process, the booking process. Air travel is one of the most advanced digital industries in the world. However, in the factory situation, I was rather disappointed up to the point what I saw in really assembly plants and manufacturing in the aerospace industries, where you still have rather old practices. And I'm always somehow joking is if you have 5 years of order books, in your pocket, why should you then change on that level? So I'm with you, Mr. Bart, that on the factory level, I really can't share too many great examples of the factory of the future yet. While on the product side and the industry side, it's probably very advanced. So whenever you work for the aerospace industry, I think you really have still big opportunities to become a leader and get competitive advantage by using more digitalization there. Again, I think on the engineering side of aerospace, this is an industry which is quite advanced with regard to simulation technologies and digital design capabilities and so on. But somehow the factory piece still seems to miss with regard to other industries like component manufacturers and so on.
Thank you. Lastly, the question someone had is how to effectively implement the factory of the future in a continuous process industry successfully. What is the hype and what is real?
Yeah, so in process industries and like BMW is a discrete manufacturing industry, process industries, I think, has two advantages. And I will think if you ask me that question again at the end of October, I should have an even better answer, as we have a master class with Bayer and their factory of the future team in October with the Leadership Network. And then hopefully learn in depth from Bayer at the headquarters and the main factory in Leverkusen in Germany, close to Cologne, what their future is. But I think the challenge is twofold in continuous process. On the one hand side, in process industries, you are far ahead with regard of sensoring and visibility often of what is happening towards conventional discrete manufacturing factories, especially old brownfields, as you have higher safety requirements. Also, to really downtime is really critical in these industries. So you actually very often have a situation where you have many more potential data points which you measure for condition monitoring, for safety environments, but don't really analyze for future gains, but you use it just to realize a steady state. On the other, but I think the data situation, the sensor situation per se often is better. However, up to the point where you have so many data points that you really don't know where to start. And actually, in many of our classes, we have a great speaker from Ferrolabs, a small industrial data startup that works mainly with process industries, like in steel production, but also in the chemical industry, to analyze this data. And they have some amazing results with a fresh eye on really looking in the piles of like 25,000 sensors in a steel mill, where traditionally 7 to 10 sensors are utilized for continuous improvement, as all the rest is just for condition monitoring. And they have a good approach to really find out first, let's say, if we look into 500 of these sensor readings out of the 25,000 we read anyway, but don't store systematically, to first find out what 500s are relevant, and then apply, in this case, a machine learning algorithm for quality improvements, operational efficiency improvements, with some amazing results, as we learn in these best presentations. And so there the trick is really to have like a data to value model, an approach to really see what are some of the foods, if you go beyond the traditional continuous improvement, 7, 10 sensor readings to, let's say, a subset of 500. The big challenge in this industry, of course, is that some of the experimentation, which I referred to earlier with regard to, like with the example of BMW and Siemens, cannot be done so easily. So as you can't interfere with the process so quickly, that what you do on a lab level is very different compared to what you do in a big scale on an industrial high throughput situation. And at Bayer, for this reason, they have a research factory. They have really on their main plant a special building, which you also will visit with the master class, where they really somehow have a very modular approach with using a lot of robotics also in this case, where they said we have to invest in a parallel situation where we really can do this experimentation and then perhaps bring it back to the line. But as I said, ask me please again after October, then I may have a better answer here.
Thank you. And then also someone just asked about prioritization of projects and resources. Is there a structure for it or any advice that you saw working?
Well, again, you may use some of these advanced maturity audit tools, what you have. So actually another good one in the UK is from Warwick University, from the supply chain group. They also have a nice Industry 4.0 readiness audit, I think for free in the internet, to get some indications where you somehow lag behind a peer group in your industry if the benchmarking tool is big enough. This could be one way to address prioritization. However, my answer to that question would be similar to another question you moderated before, with regard to really start with your problems. Don't start with the technology prioritization or what you see from consultants or tech suppliers, but really look into what are really the challenges you have, which is really where you want to improve, and where you have the feeling that somehow with the way how you work today, like with traditional continuous improvement processes, with the state of the technology you have implemented, where this is not sufficient any longer, and then talk to suppliers, tech providers, if there is an innovative technological answer to it. So your prioritization in the end should come really from the challenges, or let's address it, the opportunities you have for improvement or to bring your company to the next level. And then my invitation there would be not just look for your operational challenges you see as a plant executive within your plant, but really integrate your sales team, the product management team, as it may be that the big opportunities are really by having a factory that enables a different kind of business model for your organization. Normally, someone else thinks about the business model, and then you in manufacturing have to implement the business model. I think here with Industry 4.0, we also have the opportunity to turn it a little bit upside down and say, these are really new opportunities we have. Now let's co-create with other functions in the company. What is a change in our business model? For example, with regard to higher degrees of efficient customization, mass customization as a buzzword here, for your customers and clients. Perhaps the ability to do smaller lot sizes and address very attractive niche segments of your market that you couldn't address efficiently before. And so one example here, actually from a process manufacturer, I can't share the company name here, but this was a supplier of ingredients for the cosmetic industry. So not the brand, but the supplier making the basic chemicals for them. And they said, well, but actually we have all the components and we also have a pretty good understanding of the manufacturing process. And I think we may come up with a technology where we have a small scaled like mini plant where we can do cosmetics in small batch sizes. And then why should we not enable every influencer on Instagram to have her own cosmetic line. Nowadays, you get your own cosmetic line if you have 5 million followers, but perhaps you just have 10,000 followers. It's already a big market, and we enable you to create your own cosmetic line, and with our knowledge, we can produce it with a small, highly flexible factory. So, and if this comes up, you have a very exciting opportunity to really totally change your business model. And then this may drive get a higher priority, even if it's a very, very ambitious project, compared to, well, just let's do a little bit more continuous improvement to find quality errors in one problem.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Frank. Unless anyone has any other questions, I don't think anyone else is okay. In that case, of course, Frank, thank you very much for dedicating your time and your insightful answers. And if you do feel like you would like more time with Frank to explore the subject a bit further, I encourage you to explore his masterclass, Leading the Factory of the Future. I will share the links with all of you an hour after this webinar. Feel free to ask me any questions via an email, which will be also provided in the message. But yeah, other than that, have a great day. And Frank, thank you very much, and we'll be in touch.
Yes, thank you to all of you.